The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Welcome back to another great episode of our Best Practices webinar series with 7Signal. If you could, please let us know where you're logging in from today. If you are in the office, if you're working from home. I see a few of you have actually logged on early here. So let us know where you're joining us from. I am back in the Cleveland headquarters office today, and we are joined yet again by Jim Vada, who is down in Cincinnati. How are you today, Jim?
I'm good.
Awesome. Great to hear. And we are also joined today by our special guest, Dave Hallis. Dave, how are you today?
As you said, I'm special. I'm actually from in Kent, Ohio, or more correctly, I'm Brimfield, which is, you go south of Cleveland, there's Akron, and I'm just east of that.
All right. Thank you, Dave. And I know a running theme with the previous webinars you've joined us from is the fear that you'll miss your wine delivery. So do we have an update for that today? Is there going to be an issue here?
Good news is that I am well stocked. I won't show you the desk behind me because it's all full of wine, and there are no deliveries expected today. So I should be okay.
Excellent.
Well, that's great to hear. I see a few of you have dropped in where you're joining from. We have Stephen here from Manchester. Thanks for joining us. We have Kenneth from the office in Denmark. Welcome, Kenneth. We also have Wayne joining us again from Denver. Welcome back. And we have Rich joining us from Detroit, Michigan, working from home. So thank you to all of you for dropping that in there. Please keep letting us know where you're joining us from, and we will go ahead and get started today. So we are 7Signal, the leader in wireless experience monitoring, and we will go a little bit more into depth as to what that means and what our mission is at 7Signal. So as I said, we have two very special guests here today, Dave Hallis and Jim Vada, to dive into this great topic, Wi-Fi channel utilization 101. And I believe, Dave, we did this topic a couple months ago, which got a really great response. So super excited to get back into this. As I've said before, my name is Kelsey Rizzuto. I am the marketing specialist here at 7Signal. Really looking forward to getting started here today. A few announcements before we begin. For those of you who have joined us for recent webinars, these will all sound familiar. But just as a housekeeping reminder, we do partner with CWNP for every single one of our webinars. So if you're pursuing a certification, by watching these webinars, you are eligible for CE credits. So just let us know and we can send you over a certificate per request. We also do a product tour every single Friday at 12 noon Eastern. Go.7signal.com/tour. And we'll go ahead and drop that link in the chat here later on so you can go ahead and register if you're interested. We don't go too deep into any kind of demo or product tour on these Wednesday webinars, but I will read off a few exciting announcements here in regard to product. So we do have some exciting updates in regard to our release of Mobileye for iGel Linux and extended Linux OS coverage. We also recently added enhancements to Sapphire Eye over the air mode, and this past month, we announced the release of a portable Sapphire Eye sensor. So a lot of exciting updates there. If you haven't recently joined one of our product tours, we highly suggest going to do that so you can stay updated with all things 7Signal. Moving forward, we do post all of our archived webinars to our YouTube channel. So today's broadcast recording will be up there later this afternoon, and you can go ahead and access any of our previous webinars there as well. We also post our slides to our Twitter account later on this afternoon after every broadcast at 7Signal. So go ahead and give us a follow if you haven't already. And if you aren't active on Twitter and still want access to the slides, no problem. You can reach out to us via email and you'll receive some sort of follow-up email after today's broadcast with access to those as well. Another great reason to follow us on Twitter is because we give away a lot of 7Signal merchandise. I'm going to go ahead and read off our last week's winners who should be receiving some merch in the mail soon. So we had Vic Mywowski and Shafkat Abbas. So congratulations to you two. You should be receiving some 7Signal swag soon. And to the rest of you on the line here today, go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter and stay tuned for our trivia question later on where you could possibly win some prizes. Moving forward here today, we do have a sneak peek for you of some ROI data here from recent IDC research. We will be releasing the white paper for this in a few weeks, so please stay tuned. And one last announcement here moving forward. This will sound familiar again to those of you who have joined us, but we're really proud, really excited about this. We have recently been recognized in the Gartner 2020 Market Guide for Digital Experience Monitoring. Seven Signal has been recognized as a representative vendor for Mobileye. And again, we'll go ahead and drop a link to access this in the chat as well if you are interested. All right, on with the show here. So a little background on Seven Signal and our history. We were established in 2007 in Helsinki, Finland, and we are now located in Cleveland, Ohio. We've hit a lot of major milestones along the way that we're really proud of, such as the 1 billion data points that we're analyzing daily, in addition to the 5 million devices we're monitoring daily as well. We have over 200 customers, over 30 partners, and 14 patents, which goes to show that the technology you see from Seven Signal, you are only going to see from Seven Signal. We are also certified in over 40 countries, and we are additionally GDPR compliant for our EU folks on the line here today, which essentially means we take data and privacy very, very seriously for all of our users across the globe. So as I said, we are Seven Signal, the leader in wireless experience monitoring. And we're here because the digital experience matters. And it's largely connected to Wi-Fi connectivity issues. So usually when you're encountering some sort of problem, it bubbles up to one of these top 7 Wi-Fi issues, such as congestion, coverage loss, co-channel and radio interference, roaming issues, and more. And we're able to provide full visibility into the end user experience through an outside-in approach through Mobileye and Sapphire Eye. We're also completely AP and device agnostic, which means that the great tools, great technologies you already have installed on the network, we're incredibly complementary with. So how we're able to identify those top 7 Wi-Fi problems I just mentioned is by running active and passive tests on the edge of the network, looking for things like throughput, packet loss, latency and jitter, adapter and driver issues, and more. So a little bit more background as to what makes us so different. If you look on the right at your typical enterprise LAN infrastructure, you've got those great tools, great technologies giving you important and useful data such as your Riverbed, Cisco, Aruba, Appneta, and more. But where we come in is where they leave off. With Mobileye, we provide visibility into the user experience on the edge of the network through basically being installed on any mobile device, such as your laptops, mobile phones, Zebra scanners, your workstation on wheels, and more, giving you that full perspective from the edge of the network. And with Sapphire Eye, those are our software-enabled hardware and the sensors that give you that service level quality and RF visibility so you can get a holistic view as to what is occurring in your wireless network environment. So moving forward here, what we can also do is give you that external network visibility. Those great tools and great technologies on that enterprise LAN infrastructure. A lot of us are working from home today, and those aren't really as useful anymore. We need that visibility into our homes, into our apartments. And with Mobileye, we can give you that full visibility into the end user experience through ultimately any Mac OS, Linux, Android, or Windows device. And as I've said many, many times here, and will continue to say, work from home is here to stay. And a lot of us here are on the line working from home, or we're working from home a few days out of the week. And so it's crucial to stay connected to our work. And working from home, it's not just nice to have a Wi-Fi network connection, it's mission critical. So with Mobileye and with Seven Signal, we're able to give you that reliability and that full visibility into your home network. All right, moving forward here, as I mentioned before, we do trivia questions every week with a chance to win some Seven Signal prizes. So I'm going to go ahead and launch today's question that Dave graciously provided to us. Are you guys able to see this question here?
Yep.
All right, awesome. So the question here is, high channel utilization can mean your wireless network is very busy, your neighbor's wireless network is very busy, you have a constant source of wireless interference, or all of the above. So I see a lot of you are dropping in your answers now. Go ahead and give this a few more seconds here. And I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And let's see, how did we do here, Dave and Jim?
Looks great. Most people are saying all of the above.
Yep, perfect.
Which is definitely true, that a lot of times that the people don't realize that it's not just your network that could be busy, but it could be your neighbor. Often when I do a wireless scan, that my neighbors are actually kind of far away from me. It always surprises me that their wireless networks come in pretty strong.
All right, thank you guys, and thank you to everyone who participated here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch gears here and hand the controls over to Dave, who's going to dive into this presentation for us.
See, ready? And Kelsey, if you could let me know that if you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Cool. It's channel utilization. I think I got to click it.
Yeah, I think we just lost your screen there, Dave.
Oh, let's see.
There we go.
Okay. Oh, so about myself. I have to write notes because I forget. So it says here, I'm a solutions engineer at Seven Signal. CWNA certified. Other things about me, over 25 years of wireless experience in product development, solutions engineering, and other industry standards development. I was recognized as a Cisco innovator. So we were talking before, we're in northern Ohio. The Richfield site is where Aeronet acquisition was from. I was also the task group chair for 802.11i. That's a little bit old news now. This was published way back in 2004, and it was where the WPA and WPA2 came out. We're already on to WPA3.
Yeah, but you know what? WPA2 is still good after all these years. So you guys did some good work back then.
That's right. And it's actually kind of encouraging to see that the development of WPA3, the fundamentals are there, but it was just kind of like other things that were allowed to evolve. And so security is one of these things, you're never done.
Oh, yeah.
There's always the next, after a certain amount of time, that things are going to be old and you have to kind of upgrade it. More recently, I was the task group chair for 802.11ah. That was for sub 1 gigahertz in the US. It's the 902 to 928 ISM band for Internet of Things. That one of the things that a big topic right now that we kind of talk about a lot with 802.11ax is Internet of Things and being able to, how do you handle that traffic that is very spotty? It kind of makes the wireless network inefficient. And so one idea is to put that onto a different band. It is 11ax, but OFDMA has a different approach. And so definitely kind of interesting topic there. I was also involved with the Wi-Fi Alliance when I was first getting formulated. I was known as WECA back then, besides being involved with IEEE. And then I have a number of patents. So enough about me. Hopefully that my screen will continue to show if I hit page down. Let's see, I'm gonna try this again. Maybe I'll do it over here. Hey, Jim, are you able to see my slides?
Yep, see the CU slide now.
Okay. So channel utilization, what is it? This is the amount of activity where the wireless LAN is operating. So this could be, anything from the actual your clients talking, or it could be as that trivia question was going, it could be your neighbor traffic going on, your phone with Bluetooth, or you've got Zigbee. That type of stuff is just going to raise the noise floor to Wi-Fi. That would also be channel utilization. as we were discussing, that Wi-Fi is a shared medium. So therefore, anything that's transmitting, whether it's your neighbor or your activity, is going to make it busy. And so the question is, well, okay, so that's kind of nice, but why do I care? Well, the reason why you care is because as the channel utilization goes up, your performance is going to go down. So for instance, your neighbor, if he's on the same channel as you, and he's using the Wi-Fi a lot, all of a sudden you're going to see that your performance is going to go down. We'll get into that a little bit more in these slides. You could kind of think about this. The analogy I was putting in here was like traffic on the highway. And what happens when there's a ton of traffic on the highway? The speed drastically decreases. It's like, oh, well, and sort of what's going on. So you kind of say, oh, you mean as I use the Wi-Fi network more, my performance is going to go down. The bad news is, yeah, that's the way it goes. Now, the good news is that for some customers, we're able to kind of give you a lot of information about that traffic. And by knowing a lot of information, you're kind of able to manage the impact of it. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in these slides. For instance, if you're on a highway, you probably saw a sign like this where it says, hey, that if you were going to stay on the route that you're on, that it's going to take you so long. But if you were to take an alternate route, maybe you could kind of get there quicker. So that information is useful. This is just one of the graphs that you kind of end up seeing in 7Signal, Sapphire, and Mobileye will kind of give you this information as well. And what we're kind of showing is that that as the channel utilization is on the bottom graph and the throughput is the top graph. And what you end up seeing is they're basically the inverse of each other. Throughput is high when the channel utilization is low. And when the channel utilization goes up, your throughput decreases. A lot of times people will kind of get started and they'll say, oh, you know what, let's do some throughput testing and let's do this in the middle of the night when nobody's around so we don't disturb anybody. If your wireless network doesn't work in the middle of the night, you got some serious problems. And it's not really what you want to know, because you want to know when everybody's in the office or if everybody's in the hospital, what's that work like then? That's what you really need to know. Likewise, in Mobileye, we kind of do some of the same types of things where we end up showing you like the throughput, and you're able to relate that to the channel utilization. Likewise, that things like co-channel interference and adjacent channel interference that can kind of bring up things. We're able to kind of show you why is that, for instance, obviously that this isn't typical. This is on our test network where we have a bunch of test ideas are kind of going off and running to make some specific tests that we're doing. But we kind of show, hey, if you overdo it a bit, that'll kind of go off and you're able to see that. So I kind of talked about it. It's like, well, you know, if you get the high channel utilization, your wireless network is gonna start to degrade. Often I get the comments, it's like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. There's always interference on 2.4 gigahertz. And as I tell my kids, well, at least I used to, I don't do it anymore since they're a bit older, but I was just go, where, boo. There's nothing we can do about it. Some signals kind of, we show you, don't stick your head in the sand. There's things that if you know what's kind of going on, you can make some intelligent decisions. So I want to kind of dive into this a little bit. Well, what are we talking about with channel utilization and what exactly is going up and what can you do about it? So let's just talk about, well, what is a channel? And you're already familiar with this. I'm sure that, you know, if you're talking about like, if it's now we don't refer to it so much anymore, but it used to be like on the dials, it'd be like channel 3 on TV. And what does that mean? And so today that might mean, well, tuned to 63 megahertz with a 6 megahertz bandwidth. It's a lot easier to say channel 3. With Wi-Fi, we do the same thing. We'll talk about channels like 1, 6, and 11, some of the 5 gigahertz bands that are higher channel numbers. So the primary locations for Wi-Fi channels. Now here I don't discuss the 6 gigahertz band, but that's some great news is going on there, especially for this discussion topic. And in 2.4, that there's only 3 non-overlapping channels. Lowest data rate is 1 megabits per second. And the distance covered by that access point is relatively larger. Likelihood of interference, for instance, Bluetooth, Zigbee, likelihood of interference is going to be higher. 5 gigahertz, there's a lot more channels. If you're just kind of like doing 20 megahertz wide channels, there's 25 instead of 3. The lowest data rate is 6 megabits. The advantage of that, by making the data rate faster, your transmissions are shorter. Relative distance covered is smaller than 2.4. Likelihood of interference is likewise lower. And so therefore, when you're seeing some of our graphs, you'd end up kind of seeing something, this is typical, where you'd end up seeing that the channel utilization on 2.4 is much higher than on 5 gigahertz. And likewise, that's what you're going to end up seeing on the 6 gigahertz as well. That just because of you're going to get into these greenfield scenarios, that there's going to be less channel utilization when you get into 6 gigahertz. So sometimes people kind of look at it and they kind of look and say, well, 3 non-overlapping channels, but there's like 11 or 14 here. You know, what are you talking about, Dave? And when you actually plot them out, that's where it's easier to see that there's only 3 non-overlapping channels. And so therefore, it's a signal we suggest. Don't run on a channel besides that 1, 6, and 11, or if you're in Europe, you can run with 14. We'll discuss a little bit more about this as to why we suggest doing that. So with 2.4, it's a lot easier to, I should say, with 2.4, it's much harder to avoid overlapping on a channel. If you're at home, this is another thing where it kind of gives a misconception. If you're at home, you can kind of say, oh, it was easy for me to set up an access point. You were setting up like 1 or 2 access points. Well, okay. If you got 3 channels and you got 2 access points, it's easy for you to do some channel planning. You're kind of like, okay, that's going to be channel 1, that's going to be channel 6. Well, what if you've got like 1,000 access points or 10,000, and you got a number of buildings and they're different floors and so forth? And that makes it a lot harder to, if you're especially running on 2.4, you're going to overlap these channels. So therefore, you're going to make that channel utilization going up because they're going to be overlapping. On 5 gigahertz, because there's a lot more channels, that makes it a lot easier to kind of go off and deploy something and not have some overlap. Then likewise, then we're talking about 6 gigahertz. You're going to, since there's a lot more space, you're going to make it a lot easier to make it so that you can do things like run wider channels and still avoid having some overlap in channels. Basically, what we're trying to show here is kind of talking about the same channel use in the same area. That's kind of bad onto the left. And then I use the analogy of, for people that are old enough, that before switches, we used to have hubs, and hubs were a shared medium. So any traffic that was on any of those ports would be heard by others, so that would kind of drag down the overall throughput. Whereas on a switch, obviously it's divided up. It makes it so that you're able to segregate and run much quicker. Same type of thing, at least an analogy. Port channel planning, and I'm trying to give a graphic as what I mean by port channel planning. Say, for instance, if those circles were access points that were deployed, and they were on 2.4, and somebody didn't do a very good job of spreading those out. So you could say there's 1, 6, and 11, and somebody went crazy with channel 1. And we do have some kind of graphs that we can kind of graph out and show you, oh, we'll see the channel utilization per channel. And you could end up seeing that, oh, 1 is much higher. So therefore, 1 must be in use a lot more. Maybe they want to dig into that channel planning a little bit more. Port channel planning, likewise, the analogy, if I was talking about like the traffic on the highway. Well, what if you had a 3-lane highway and everyone was just in the high-speed lane and nobody wanted to use the 2 slower lanes? You might want to spread out. So obviously the traffic is going to go much better if you spread out rather than have everybody in the same lane. That'd be silly. It's the same silliness if you were to do this in wireless. Channel widths, this is old news now. And this is going to continue to be a challenge. And it's sort of a balancing act. 802.11n introduced 40 megahertz wide channels. We were kind of talking about with the 5 gigahertz It's like, oh, okay, we can use 40 megahertz wide channels. And then AC introduced the 80 megahertz channels and 160 megahertz wide channels. That all of a sudden becomes a bit of a challenge, when we get into the 5 gigahertz band. And all of a sudden, when we move to 6 gigahertz, then all of a sudden it's going to alleviate some of these things. So we're kind of like, maybe 2.11 was kind of positioning themselves for the future and the opening up of the 6 gigahertz band, and that ended up happening. And so things are going to work out really nicely. So when we take a look at the 2.4 band, it's kind of easy, why would you suggest not using 40 megahertz wide channels? Because if you use a 40 megahertz wide channel, you're not only just on the same channel as like channel 1, but you're also interacting with the next channel, like channel 6. So we suggest always avoiding that, running 40 megahertz wide channels in 2.4. Channel widths, a lot of times when people, the first time people look at it, they say, hey, look, if I run with a wider channel, I can get this throughput that's going to be really great. It's not always a good idea. It's one of these, like this guy saying, if you're on a highway and you saw something like this in front of you, you might either back up way behind them or decide to see if you got an opportunity to pass them, because you might not want to be around it, because it's just not a good idea. Channel selection in the 2.4 band, likewise, sometimes what you end up seeing is that there's a lot of traffic on 1.6.11, and then people will end up putting the access points on different channels as well. It's sort of those intermediate ones. It's like, hey, what if I sneak in it on 4? Won't that be good? And you can kind of get a visual here saying, no, it doesn't really look like a good idea. Another way to kind of think of it is getting back to the highway. You can kind of see that one car there, he's straddling the line. If you're driving along and you saw that there's a lot of traffic and you saw that somebody was straddling that line, I'm sure that there would be some 4-letter words mumbled, and some people would be kind of like, hey, buddy, don't you want to pick a lane? Doesn't look like it's a good idea. It's not a good idea in traffic, and it's also not a good idea for our wireless LANs. Getting a little bit more into that, the reason why is because there's 2 types of deferrals when you're going to transmit. One is for if you're on the same channel and you're able to hear the traffic. There's something called the NAV, network allocation vector. They kind of refer to it as virtual carrier sense. And if you detect the beginning of the packet, you'll then know, oh, this transmission is going to last for so long. But if it's just noise, if it's like somebody's transmitting on a channel that's off, you're not going to be able to detect that, and it's just going to be referred to you as noise. So you're not going to have as good an idea of how you need to wait until that transmission is done. Getting back onto this slide, moving along, that 5 gigahertz, we're talking about 25 non-overlapping 20 megahertz wide channels. Obviously, once we get into 6 gigahertz, there's going to be a lot more channel widths. Channel space that you kind of use. And we also kind of show, well, why would you not want to do things like 160 megahertz on 5 gigahertz? You suggest waiting for the 6 gigahertz band for those 160 megahertz wide channels. So here at some signal, when multiple APs are being used, 160 megahertz wide channels and 5 gigahertz, you should kind of avoid that. If you're in a home network and you're saying, you know what, my neighbors are not really, I'm not detecting my neighbors and so forth, yeah, you kind of say, okay, I'll run it home with 1 access point, 160 megahertz, if you really needed it. 80 megahertz wide channels, those should really kind of be used with care if you're in the 5 gigahertz band. Now, once you go over to the 6 gigahertz, I kind of heard people refer to it as, once you go over to 6 gigahertz, 80 is the new 40. Because it's like at 5 gigahertz, everybody kind of just going to 40 megahertz wide channels, but kind of like, well, let's hold off on running bigger channel widths. When you go over to 6 gigahertz, 80 megahertz wide channels, it's doable. Also, we kind of end up showing here that even on 5 gigahertz, that it's easy to visualize 80 megahertz and why that they end up overlapping some of the 20 megahertz wide channels. What is channel utilization? There's a lot of stuff that's kind of going on. And we're talking about how busy are the airwaves. And so there's things like 802.11 management traffic. And then there's actual data packets that you're transferring. That's kind of like the good stuff. That's what you want to maximize. You want to minimize everything else. And then there's things like interference that could be going on. We're talking about Bluetooth devices or Zigbee, or like the microwave oven would be a good example of that. The non-Wi-Fi transmissions, that's where we're kind of talking about like Bluetooth and Zigbee type of transmissions. And so we talk, the nice thing about trying to kind of look at channel utilization and breaking it up is we kind of can then show the impact of just some of the management type of traffic. Here we're kind of showing that the upper left, that's where we're kind of showing that things with any type of traffic, and then to the right, we kind of going to end up showing on the bottom left is the QBSS channel utilization. So what do all these kind of things mean? One is that on the bottom, we're showing energy plus the 802.11 traffic. So it's a combination. So that's kind of the gross amount of traffic that's kind of going on. And then when we're saying that's on the top left, that's strictly just the busy with Wi-Fi traffic. So that's not the noise, that's strictly just, yes, it is traffic. And then the one to the right is the beacon traffic. It's strictly, yes, it's a subset of the one to the left. The one to the right is saying, this is Wi-Fi traffic, but it's just the beacons. Do you care about beacons? No, you care about your data. And you can kind of see those look kind of very similar. Here we're really showing is that 85% of the traffic in this case, this traffic is just from beacons. So that's that's a big waste, not very efficient. So what affects how much time is being used up by beacons? They typically end up kind of going out 10 times a second. If you're supporting older devices, especially where I'm referring to like 2.4 gigahertz, if you're supporting like 802.11b devices, then the time that it takes to transmit those beacons ends up going up higher because they're going to be transmitted at the lowest basic rate. So if you've got 1 megabit per second enabled to support some older device, it's going to take much longer to transmit that beacon. If you're supporting multiple SSIDs, here we kind of see the impact of, well, you just doubled your traffic by having 2 SSIDs on the same channel. So therefore, obviously, that's going to increase your channel utilization dramatically. We suggest, running 2 to 3. Once you start getting beyond that, you're really going to start to eat up your channel utilization on just transmitting the beacons. Then earlier I was talking about that these typically kind of go out 10 times a second. And so, well, what if you were to just not transmit them 10 times a second? Well, what about if you're like 3 times a second? Obviously, that would make it better for you as far as overhead. So obviously that this can make a dramatic impact. So if you're kind of looking at it, and we could kind of show you that in certain cases that there'd be an 80% reduction in overhead, obviously that's going to make it so that your improvement is going to greatly improve. Likewise, here we're kind of showing is that not only, because this is what people really care about, is that by reducing the overhead, your connection becomes vastly more stable. You can kind of think about it as that highway analogy, is that if you don't have a lot of traffic, you're less likely to get into an accident, right? And so you're going to be a lot more stable with your ride. So what do we do there? We talked about removing support for older devices, removing or consolidating SSIDs, and then extending that beacon period. Those 3 types of things done, and that's made it so that we had an 80% reduction in overhead. Another note about beacons, you might see that your printer kind of showing up, and this is because of a feature called Wi-Fi Direct. And the suggestion there is that you kind of, if you're not using it, then to disable it on your printer, because it's eating up overhead. If it's not being used, then you're paying for it. So you might as well kind of turn it off. For instance, I don't have my printer running on Wi-Fi. I have it actually hooked up via Ethernet because I don't actually need to have it running on Wi-Fi. So Is your printer connected to Ethernet? If you are, why do you have this Wi-Fi direct thing set up? There's no reason you can kind of turn that off. Another thing I'm going to talk about probe requests and probe responses. Probe requests is where you're trying to find an access point. And that's likewise, if you're in like a stadium, this is typically what we end up seeing in like stadiums or some large area. You'd also see this in libraries where there's a lot of access points, is that the probe kind of goes out, that's being sent by the client, and all access points that hear it respond. And really, the client doesn't care about the ones that are really far away. You want to kind of make it so that the ones that are closer, the access points that are closer, are more likely to be sent out and heard. Most enterprise wireless vendors do have a feature so that you could say, hey, don't respond to the probe request unless the signal strength of the probe request is above a certain threshold. That makes it so more, it just makes things much better because you've reduced the amount of traffic by the amount of probe responses going out. Likewise, the clients are more likely to connect up to a close access point. So overall, it's a great idea. What else kind of consumes channel utilization? So I think that you mean there's something besides Wi-Fi that's wireless? And the answer is yes, we all know this. There's things like Bluetooth, obviously on your phones, and there's Zigbee. So there's stuff that's out there. And so if you're looking at spectrum, that we're kind of able to show that here. Usually like the bands, if people are familiar with Bluetooth, one Bluetooth device is not an issue. But if you've got a lot of Bluetooth devices, that they're a hopper, and so you end up seeing them sweeping across the band. And what you end up seeing if it's something that's during the day, people show up and you see the signal strength of that band kind of increasing. Then also you do have things like Zigbee. So you're able to kind of see those Zigbee devices kind of popping up on the channel. So sometimes the way that you could kind of deal with that, it would be, if it's something like Zigbee, you could typically put it into a channel that's where it's not overlapping with Wi-Fi. Or you might say, well, you know what, I kind of need this. So you might say, well, let me dedicate for one of my channels for just those Zigbee devices, and then use the other two for the 8 to 11 traffic. So I kind of went through a lot. I know we're kind of going a bit long, and I wanted to kind of turn it over back to Kelsey for some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And we do have some good Q&A, good questions coming in. If anybody else in the audience has a question for Dave, please use the Q&A panel to bring it in. We do have I'll highlight a few. Shafkat, hope I got your name right. Nice compliment. He says, thank you all for arranging such informative webinars. So thank you for coming and joining us. Question here, can I know about channel coloring? What is the meaning of showing different 2 coloring on channel in the previous picture? I think that was from one of the earlier slides. Yeah, I don't think he was talking about BSS coloring either.
Yeah, that's what I was going to refer to, Jim. I was like, well, when you say coloring, that could be, there's a special meaning for that under 82.11ax. And the color in the slides, I was just trying to make it obvious that, oh, if it was like, for instance, channel 1, trying to make all the channel 1s the same color. So it was a little bit easier to visualize that they're all on the same channel.
Yeah. Andre says, if we're treating 20 megahertz channels and 5 gigahertz as non-overlapping, why don't we use a channel 15913 channel scheme for 2.4 gigahertz?
Did you follow that 15913?
Yes, must be. Here in the US, we just have 1 through 11, but some countries can use more of the band than we can.
Oh, so are you interpreting the question as far as why didn't we just say the 5 gigahertz channels were 13 rather than something like 64 or something like that, 36?
It's really a question about the 2.4 gigahertz band. And I think, I think the answer to that is that you can, if you've got channels 12 and 13, use 1, 5, 9, and 13. But from what I understand, in many countries that do have those channels available, you'll still see 1, 6, and 11 used a lot. And if your neighbors are not using the same, scheme as you, 1, 5, 9, and 13, if they're using 1, 6, and 11, then you're going to have a lot of adjacent channel interference. So if you can get away with it, I would see if it works. Okay, question from Steve. Do all Wi-Fi 6 APs support all the 5 gigahertz channels?
Good question. Short answer, I don't know. Yeah, well, one of the things that I found was that not on access points, but actually on a lot of, since I was at Cisco and we ended up, if we were like on 5 gigahertz, we'd end up supporting all the channels. That then it was a bit of an eye opener when I came to 7 Signal, that I would end up finding that all manufacturers did not support all the channels. So it's always a good idea to, if you're going off and buying some equipment, read the finer print, say which ones do you support. I don't know, Jim, I don't know if you have more information on that question.
Well, from what I've seen, the good news is they all support 5 gigahertz. One of the differences between 802.11ax and 802.11ac is we're adding back support for 2.4 gigahertz. And so with 802.11ac, you had to support 5 gigahertz to be a 11ac AP. With Wi-Fi 6, it kind of raised the possibility that we could have cheap, low-end, 2.4 gigahertz only APs again. And I've not seen that. They all seem to support 5 gigahertz. And I think the reason is that's where you get the crazy high throughput with those wide channels. But to support the full band, you have to also support all the DFS channels. And that requires special certification from the FCC. So enterprise APs and the vendors that make them will submit their APs to the FCC, go through the certification process and get them approved. Consumer APs often don't do that to save on money and get product out the door on the market faster. So they often will only support Uni 1 and Uni 3, at least in the US, where you can use those bands without DFS support. Maybe one more question, Dave, here from Stephen. Do we have to worry about the channels in the newer standards as they now use DCA, dynamic channel assignment?
You always have to worry about new channels, because it's one of the things where the channels that are allowed to be used are really governed by regulatory agencies. For instance, in the US, there's a 6 gigahertz band, other ones. And then as far as the dynamic channel, yes, that is something that you need to kind of keep in mind. But the 6 gigahertz band is so much larger. I think there's so much more opportunity, plus that you don't have to worry about protection mechanisms when you're in 5 gigahertz. So therefore, the analogy I kind of always have is like there's a 2, 4, and 5 gigahertz. And when you went in 2.4, you kind of went to OFDM, that you had to have these protection mechanisms because there might be something transmitting at direct sequence. So I kind of see it the same way as when you go over to 6 gigahertz, that just as Jim mentioned before about there are some commercial products that don't support everything on 5 gigahertz, that I would expect that you might see some of that same type of thing in 6 gigahertz. But the amount of channels that you're going to have is going to be so much larger. So I think it is something that you want to keep in mind and see if that they are supported. And I don't know that I've had enough experience seeing the amount of product that's been out there. I would kind of expect that there would probably be some differentiation between 6 gigahertz products and the channels that they support. Let me turn it over to you, Jim, and see if you got any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think if you're using dynamic channel assignment, if you're leaving it up to the AP or controller to choose the channel and come up with the channel plan. Personally, I've been burned by that so many times. I think you do have to worry about it and keep an eye on it. Now you can tune those algorithms from some vendors and get, more acceptable results, but it's something that I would recommend you keep an eye on. Dave showed a slide earlier that showed like 9 2.4 gigahertz APs and 7 of them were on channel 1. Unfortunately, sometimes that's the result of those auto channel planning algorithms. The results aren't always so great. So keep an eye on it and make sure you're getting, a channel plan that looks appropriate. But I think there's also, in that question, something to do, with the wider channels and how some APs and clients can dynamically change their bandwidth, which is called dynamic bandwidth operation. I don't think that's very widely supported, and I'm just not convinced that protocol actually works all that well, because you have to do this frame by frame analysis of the availability of every single sub-channel in your wide channel, and then you have to use RTS-CTS, a protection mechanism Dave mentioned that can use up channel utilization on its own. And again, you're kind of leaving it in the hands of software rather than designing carefully around the best use of the spectrum. So I think you can tell my bias there. I'd rather design a nice channel plan and let APs operate in dedicated spectrum. But certainly, going the other way, there are engineers that do that successfully too.
Yeah, I agree that I have this kind of the same thoughts. Some of the different ones that change channels. We've seen it, just like what you said, is sometimes that one slide where it's like, oh, there's a whole bunch of APs on channel 1. We definitely have seen that as a result. We've also seen this, if you're in a very busy environment and that the system cannot figure out where it wants clients, and it ends up kind of switching channel, and all of a sudden it just kind of goes crazy. But all the I've definitely seen that as well, where the APs just keep on continuously changing channels. So if nothing else, you might want to, if you said you wanted to have that, you might want to at least turn it down so it changes channels less frequently, like maybe once a day or something like that.
Yeah, good point. All right, Kelsey, I think that just about wraps it up.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Jim, for helping out with the Q&A. And thank you, Dave, again, for joining us for this great topic today, Wi-Fi Channel Utilization 101. And thank you to everyone on the line today for giving us 45 minutes out of your workday to join us for another great episode of the Best Practices webinar series. So thanks to everyone here, and have a great rest of your day. And we hope to see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.